you may begin if you wish.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for joining us today. We are Team Juicy and we will be discussing Invest, Building Trust in the Digital Age. I am Christina.
I'm Jessica.
Cool.
I'm Emily.
So today we'll be speaking about the challenge, which will then move us into defining the problem, which is research, assumptions, and synthesis. Then we'll talk about testing concepts, and then we'll move on from the testing to the solution, and then finally future considerations. So the challenge. The client is Invest Africa. Invest Africa is a young organization, and they want to set themselves up to be a hub between volunteers and organizations in Africa, connecting them, so people with certain skills, matching them with organizations in Africa who are providing aid locally there. Their aim is to transfer volunteer skills into the organizations they serve. So, the ambition from the brief as we read it is an onboarding process of a digital product that's solving for, sorry, that got cut off. And the audience is academic institutions and corporate entities with corporate social responsibility departments. Just to take a little bit of a step back and give you some background, this client, Invest, has worked with Designation before in the respect that the last team that worked with them focused on connections between volunteers and organizations and matching volunteers. So the outcome from their research process was they ended up creating local volunteer applications with the assumption that matching mechanisms took precedence over onboarding and skill-based assessments. But there's a problem that still exists. So this led to lower skilled volunteering opportunities being prioritized and higher skilled and more expensive African organizations' needs being shelved. I'm sorry, I think I need to reword some of that. Defining the problem. So we started off by just getting some initial market research. We looked at several different organizations who work with volunteers, organize volunteer trips to Africa specifically, and we garnered some main takeaways. And those are transparency of resources. So what we really liked between the organizations who seemed to be organized and had a lot of different options were they were very transparent about the resources of funds and also where they were sending their volunteers. And they provided information that was upfront. So they provided a lot of information if people are looking to join. We also spoke with our client, who also happened to be an SME, and from speaking with her, we were able to garner that some of her main concerns were trust, as far as vetting the individuals and the organizations that she was going to be working with, and she mentioned that vetting was very important during the process. So then we jumped into interviewing some users and actually just wanted to see their stance on things. So we spoke with 6 individual volunteers and 2 volunteer organizers. Of the individual volunteers, 4 were female, 2 were male. They ranged between 24 and 55 years old. They had varied backgrounds as far as what their experience is. And of the volunteer organizers, both were female, 31 and 44, and their titles were Director of International Outreach and Missions, and the other was an Executive Director of a small nonprofit that works with sending volunteers to Africa. So after all of our research, we tested our assumptions based on the brief. We had assumed that our user base was academic institutions and corporate entities with corporate social responsibility departments. But we learned after our research that the reality of the situation was that our user base was actually lifelong and spiritual volunteers. So some key takeaways from our user research was we learned that all of these people, 100% of them had volunteering values instilled in them as children, and they also had some type of religious influence that helped them want to volunteer. And also all of them found out about volunteering opportunities through word of mouth. So we decided to create a persona to encapsulate this, the people that we spoke with. So our first user is Grace. She's our primary persona. She's the established empowerer. She represents the individual volunteers. We also have Daniel, who's our secondary persona, and he represents the organization planners. So Grace and Daniel both had goals and frustrations, and we just wanted to highlight the ones that they both sort of had in common, so what the similarities are here. So Grace's goal, she wants to maximize what she can do. Daniel wants to serve in any capacity he can. Grace wants to build sustainable relationships, and Daniel wants to build and sustain international partnerships. Of the frustrations, Grace doesn't enjoy long application processes, and Daniel really dislikes planning for trips abroad because they can be challenging with different options. Some of Grace's frustrations are disorganized volunteer work, and Daniel's are last-minute details can be difficult. So from all of our research during the first sprint, we were able to come up with a problem statement that sort of encapsulated all that we had found. And that is, moralistically motivated lifelong volunteers need a simple and informed way to join a reputable outreach organization with partners in Africa to share their skills and resources, because it can be overwhelming to obtain project logistics and build trusted partnerships, especially when volunteering abroad. We also came up with 4 guiding design principles that will help steer our project forward. So that is simplified but thorough. We wanted users need an onboarding flow that is easy to use but also gathers all the important data from the user. Informed direction. Users need a way to be kept abreast of what's required of them and shown in a well-communicated manner the steps they must go through in order to complete the process. Show impact. We want to remind users of the good they are doing, as well as the sustainable effect their efforts have on the communities they help in order to maintain motivation. And transparency of resources. Users will also know how the organization distributes skills and funds in order to boost their legitimacy. Now I will pass this off to my teammate Jess, who will talk about testing concepts.
So our research provided insight into narrowing our direction and identifying where trust is built based on our personas and their respective journey maps to create some initial concepts. The commonalities of the personas led to a common direction in creating our concepts. To refresh, the commonalities were to maximize impact and serving, which led to a insight, or sorry, this is actually wrong, but okay, build sustainable relationships, their frustrations were complicated application in the trip planning, and as well as working with disorganized organizations or applicants. The common direction led to, in response to the maximizing impact and serving, would be to have a personalized search function catered to the users, having transparency of information, and a means of personal connection for users to have trust as a foundational element in building and sustaining relationships. Having a simple application process that provides detail upfront to avoid a complicated application and trip planning details, as well as ensuring a vetting process for both organizations and applicants to further their trust and legitimacy. Within the opportunities found in the journey maps, in order to further the directional insight that we received, we took Grace and Daniel's journey maps and then we highlighted the opportunities from both. And these are the opportunities. And we were able to identify where trust comes into play when looking at the opportunities from both Grace and Daniel. So some initial concepts that we were able to take is that we each took a different approach to how trust could be built. And the first would be a quick and easy application flow. The second would be the sign-up guide. The third was a facts upfront process, as well as a personalized skill match concept. So these concepts led us into some insights after we tested them, into less is more. So we learned that users expect a minimal process in onboarding, to have selective visuals in order to create content hierarchy, as well as we discovered that we had some overlapping concepts and ideas, which led us to knowing that we need more of what's missing. So having a personalized search engine for opportunities, having the ability to establish trust for projects and organizations, as well as being able to go back to the problem statement and research. And so to rethink the concepts, we took the two that were similar and we combined them. And then we implemented going back into the problem statement, the word of mouth. And they became the new and revised concept for the word of mouth became review and share, which tapped into sharing into social media as well as reading reviews from past applicants. Having a segmented onboarding, which was revised from the easy application concept to go through. I don't know what's going on there. I'm gonna have to redo these slides, but yeah. So knowing before you go was from the facts that were upfront concept, as well as the perfect match, which was a revision of the skill match concept. So I'll pass it off to Will to talk about the feedback we got.
Thank you. All right, so so from our testing feedback, we went into finding what the users liked and they disliked about our concepts. So what our users liked were they liked having trip details and requirements clearly visible. They liked the personalization. They liked to enter their skills, to find projects, and to sign up with their social media or LinkedIn. They also liked the personal connection, so sharing their trip with their social network and also seeing reviews and being able to contact previous volunteers. What they disliked was the lack of details. So on the other side, while they liked having the clear information, they still felt that there were some details, important trip details missing, or felt that the option to filter opportunities by skills was limiting, and confusing wording or features. So users felt confused by the term virtual volunteering. Without any explanation, they were left guessing as to what that was. And overwhelming page elements. So users felt that some pages were too busy and it distracted them from the task they're trying to complete. So some opportunities that arose from that were more trip details. So trip details such as timeline of the project, filtering options that include also the timeline and the country that they want to visit. Providing more information on what the virtual volunteering actually means and what's required of the volunteers that choose that option. And feature information requirements, eliminating, sorry, this is the messed up bullet point. So the final bullet point is eliminating clutter and distracting information. So up until this point, we had this insight or pivot that was mentioned by Christina, but we felt that we weren't really addressing it with our prototypes. Christina's new concept was addressing the word of mouth aspect, but we're wondering how we're going to solve for the spiritual users. So how are we going to solve for their needs, and are their needs so much different from the non-spiritual users? So some potential solutions that came up or that we thought of were to add an option to filter by religion. So offering people the ability to filter these projects by the religion of their choosing, or maybe even multiple religions. And then also an events page for religious meetups. So in one user interview that we conducted, we found out that they found out about an opportunity through a meetup that they attended. So having that page on Invest was something that we considered. In the end, we felt that was too out of our onboarding scope and also the scope of Invest Africa. So the bigger insight was when deciding on what opportunities to choose, users wanted half of our users wanted the project details up front, and the other half wanted to contact someone and establish a personal connection before deciding on which opportunity to choose. So we were wondering which side we should focus on. So why not both? Why not cater to both audiences by providing the facts up front and also building that personal connection? We didn't see a reason why we should just choose one. Having these options available gives all of our users a way to build trust with the organization in a way that they prefer. So all of this led us to our Converge concept, which was a welcoming and informative website that provides transparency of information, and a documentation of experience to build trust and establish a personal connection with the users, and also the ability to find skills-based opportunities to ignite a desire for the user to get involved. And so now I shall pass it over to Emily, who's going to have the big reveal.
I'm just letting you know that that was 15 minutes, but we'll let you keep going.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we took our one solid loaded concept and brought it to life. So you might have remember Will mentioned the spectrum of trust. So users like Grace and Daniel really value either transparency or personal connection, and this is what builds a sense of trust for them. So that led us into Entrust. And so this is creating that personal connection and transparency to establish the trust in the organization. And so now we're going to put ourselves in Grace's shoes and walk through her first experience with Invest Africa. So we're on the homepage. We see Get Started button, current featured projects, scrolling down, getting familiar. We see a little bit more about Invest. But we just want to get started and jump in. So we're going to go back up and click on Get Started. And that's going to take us to this next page where it says, what are you good at? So I'm good at project management, so I'm going to click on that. And I can see that I can also sort by timeline, country, project type, and I can also filter by religious preferences as well. So based on all of these preferences, I get skill matches. And so my 100% match is a monkey habitat construction, so I'm going to click on that. And I want to learn more. So I see they have a video I can look at, skills, I can directly contact someone from the organization, and I can also see what's provided and not provided with the project. So I want to hear more about other people's experiences, so I'm going to click on reviews. And I'm going to see that someone named Grace just went there in October, and I can even ask her a question. So if I'm really curious later on, I can come back and do that. But I'm feeling good about this, so I'm going to go back to projects, and I'm going to apply. So, clicking on apply here. And once I get to the project page for applying, I can see that it's giving me breadcrumbs. So step by step showing me how long the application is going to be, and I can connect it with LinkedIn. But I just want to do this the long way, so I'm going to sign up as a volunteer. And I like that it's showing me that which fields are mandatory. I don't want to put my middle name in, it's a little embarrassing, so we're going to skip that. And then filling out my nationality of my passport, which makes sense for doing a volunteer mission. Don't want to have my phone number yet. And we're just going to type in my email. I'm assuming that I'm creating a password so I can come back later. And then I'm going to click on the privacy policy before I move on to the next step. Which turns out it is references and resumes. So this looks like it might take me a little bit more time. Now I'm going to sign up for LinkedIn. And so I'm going to allow access, type in some names in there, select Larry, my boss, or my brother, and then all I have to do is put in my connection to them so that I can move on to the next step, which will be adding adding my resume. So I'm going to add that from LinkedIn, very quick and easy, and then move on to my personal statement. So here they're clearly wanting me to tell a little bit more about why I want to join the organization. So I'm going to type something in here, or I can upload a file. And I'm going to submit. So before I move on, it's asking me if I'm sure I'm ready to submit my application. I am. And here I am at the end. So I can see that I'm going to be getting an email to my inbox with next steps. And I can be on the lookout for scheduling a video consultation if I'm the right fit. And I can also see more about the organization too. So that's Grace's first experience with Entrust. And with that in mind, a lot of our users went through the same experience and were thinking, wow, I'd like to see additional features on here, which really weren't in the scope of our current project. But they are future considerations. So people would like to see more opportunities besides what is just skill matched for them. They want to see all the options, but they do really like the personal touch of skill match. People are going to need to be joining the organization as an organization in need from Africa. So we're going to need to figure out what their requirements are and conduct more user interviews on that side. Users want more filtering fields, and so that's going to be in the form of wanting an urban area or rural. Virtual volunteering was a huge hot button topic throughout this, and people are really interested in it, but a couple concerns are that people aren't sure how feasible it is and how it's going to work on the ground in Africa. So that's something that we need to look a little bit more deeply into. And individual organizations, people love to be able to read more on these pages. They do want an about page, and they also want smaller details like seeing what's involved in the application before they go through that process. And with that is the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for coming out. Do you have any questions for us?
All right, good job.
That's like 20.
2020 or 2030. Yeah. It's within striking distance though. It's like 40.
It's not 15.
What was it? What was our total time?
30.
2030. We need to take some years off of that. Presentation needs a little
There's
facelift.
some things you can cut.
Yay!
Yeah, there are a couple things on my slides that I'm taking out, which you probably noticed because I didn't talk about them.
Although the product walkthrough was pretty interesting. I think that was kind of a good thing. So,
So it was on the slides before, so like literally right before we presented, I'm gonna take out ease of use because I really only need to talk about why we have the name. So
Yeah.
let's see. Overall, let's give the overall. I think you guys all presented pretty well for the most part. Let's see.
You guys
Christina?
were all looking at the screen.
too much.
It's way too much. I shouldn't say all of you, some more than others, but I understand that you were just making this, so I expect a lot of practicing from you because you should not be reading so much off the screen, and your screen should not have so much on it that there's stuff to be read off of anyways. So
Yeah, and Will, you were like saying it, like, let's get that, I mean, we have some technical difficulties basically, but getting from behind the podium is going to be good for you. Christina, you were out from behind the podium, it seemed like a fair amount as well too. Yeah, more eye contact.
Can I ask a specific question on that? So when I'm walking through like the product demo, is it okay if I'm looking at the screen to point things out?
oh
or is
yeah,
that too much?
definitely.
Okay.
It's more the direct reading of bullet points off the screen. Like you should know these enough that you can riff off of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you guys are getting this deck together still. Like, how many times have you guys practiced at this moment?
3 times.
Okay. Well, keep on going. We're gonna cut this down because we have to. Let's see, let's start. Yeah.
Can somebody just maybe control?
Yeah, there you go.
Where did the speak go?
Oh,
it's
it's
in
I
back.
put it back in there. I was too ambitious.
That's why it doesn't work.
Apologies.
Thanks. So your deck looked nice though.
Yeah.
You guys look good. All right.
Are we allowed to say that we're Team Juicy or no?
Yeah, is that good or bad? I didn't know.
You don't have your logo all over the place, so you can just call yourself that if you want to. I think that's fine. I like your new nav structure. I thought your deck looks
Or
pretty
just don't if it's not.
good.
Yeah, it's
I don't know. It's not on your deck. You just say we're the team.
our team. Yeah.
Yeah. Our team. Just do
Like,
that. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. It makes me question what is juicy about you guys.
Yeah. What does that mean?
Like those guys have Cyclops has like brand and stuff because of her
Yeah.
love, but you
Maybe
guys
too
don't
much
have
brand
that.
stuff.
So
All right. Okay. I think you guys will want to watch this video to see what you can cut down on. I really do think you guys should you'll want to watch this. Christina, I thought you told a pretty good story when you got on here. Of course, there's a bunch of inconsistencies in the deck, like this being missing. It tended to trip you up. Everybody had issues, I think. Maybe a little bit less so with you, Emily, when it came to kind of glitches or something. So definitely walk through this and make sure you proof the deck, make sure everything is where you think it's supposed to be. Make sure things are lined up as well too. Make sure that things are kind of consistent and you're not misspelling things. There's a couple of instances of wording on the deck, which I'm going to bring up. I think all of us are going to probably bring up, where it just seems a little bit off. So really tighten this thing up for the most part. It'll make it easier to present. Christina, you did an interesting thing, which is that you actually brought in the previous team's information to kind of tell a story of what this thing ended up being. And actually, this was very interesting. I thought you actually, like, you kicked off with a kind of an interesting storyline, which is to say that you kind of summarized what Emiola kind of frustration with at the beginning. So yeah, in some cases, people that would volunteer at the local level and not even in Africa. That was the last problem that they had. The last two cohorts ago, they came up, this is a problem for them. There's a lot of words on this. There's a lot of copy on this. So
Yeah.
I think you could probably make this more concise, and I think you could tell the story a little bit more effectively.
Yeah, like bullets are fine. I would just say that your client in brief, like the first page, you, this one. I feel like you could bring up the who we spoke to, or like you can, I feel like you need to marry this and the who we spoke to because Emil is here. You kind of like, I don't know, I feel like you could do something where you're like, you, in the third slide or fourth slide where you say who we spoke to, you talk about the SME interview and it just feels a little disjointed from this. So I'd say either combine those or rethink that. I mean, remember she's here, so you're kind of like introducing her. This is your first slide and you're not introducing her, but you can say like, and you know, we spoke to our wonderful client or something like that.
Also,
Because like the audience is like you could talk about your SMEs here and the audience or the people you talk to or your users. I don't know.
there's also, this is really tiny, but the ambition's not lined up with the onboarding process.
Yeah, something happened.
Okay.
I don't know what happened.
Just in case, so you.
Half of it got erased as well. So I was like,
Okay.
wait a second. And then I wanted to just like, I should have just improv'd or like gone off because I know what this is, the onboarding process of a digital product solving for X, Y, and Z, but I got nervous, sorry.
That's fine.
Okay. Well, you take up the deck, and I think other people had a bunch of hiccups, and you know.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
We're helping. This is the time.
Right. I mean, this isn't your final deck. I mean, this isn't tomorrow, so this is good news.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank God you guys made us do this seriously. Thank you.
And on this, I just don't like the phrase, but a problem still exists. Opportunity. Like, problem is negative.
Mhm.
My dad always says, don't say no problem. Always say, happy to help or something, because no problem has like a negative connotation to it. Like, oh, it wouldn't be an issue for me. I don't know. It's an issue.
No, I can see that. Your dad's a wise person.
It's pretty cool.
Um,
But yeah, in this context, like, but there's still opportunity.
yeah,
Okay.
I think this is a really good setup. though.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, like this is something like masterstroke. Like you're telling the client that's sitting in the audience that they didn't solve for it the first time out of the gate. We'll see what happens going forward, but at least you're sort of setting it up so that you know that you're not addressing this initial problem or this initial opportunity.
Actually, I wanted to ask about that because I wasn't sure. I'm guessing in the audience might also be people who worked on this the first time around. Maybe like isn't Aaron's
No.
not going to be okay.
You're good.
I was like, I don't want to insult them if I say it like this.
They know the problem. They got the wrong users. It's okay.
Okay.
You got different users too, of course, but that's another thing. That's
Yeah.
another issue entirely.
Surprise!
Yeah. We spent a lot of time talking about this one. I think that it might be, I'm trying to remember what the talking points were on this sort of thing. It might be more useful to, both in this slide and this slide, I'd marked down that I'd much rather hear about the insights from what you heard about this than than this. This is you're showing us what you did, but still we want to know a little bit more about the competitors and the synthesis of the information you got out of it, as well as this too. So what are the insights you got out of the client SME product? If you decide to keep this here, if you want to kick this back into the beginning section, we can do that too. But insights and takeaways are more important.
Okay.
But I like you guys are giving me a little nav bar at the bottom. That's kind of, I like that you guys are trying to give us a sense of where we are in the place in the deck. Onward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. volunteers?
Yeah, just really tiny things, but you might want to be consistent in punctuation, and also just, it's not here, but when you're capitalizing versus not. But
Yeah.
Like, do you need a semicolon here versus a comma? I don't know. It's
Oh, yeah.
just
True.
tiny things distract me.
Sentence
That's
case.
good. Thank you for catching that.
Yeah, you're gonna hear this from Mike when you get into career phase too, like sentence case, individual volunteers is capital I individual, volunteers are capital V volunteer and volunteer organizers. Like be consistent, like this isn't strunk and white, but you guys need to like try to be consistent with the way that you present information.
Is it okay then that like our title page is not, because that's kind of our style where it's lowercase, like the actual titles of this,
Title's okay.
but the actual content of the page should follow regular.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so.
It'll just be easier for you because you have a lot of like sentences. It's gonna be weird if your sentences start with lowercase. All right, next.
Next.
Hit all the buttons.
Yeah.
So I think that you should just switch this. So keep hitting, Doug.
Yep.
Okay, so it goes first assumptions, first circle, then tell me 1, 2, 3, and then boom, this is the pivot. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah, so I'm saying like here's what we assumed, but afterwards we found out these main things, which leads us to see that these are actually our use. This is
Yeah.
actually our user base.
Yeah.
That's
So
a-
currently you have circle, circle, line. I want circle, line of stuff, last circle.
Cool.
Yeah, I was willing to break this up into separate slides even too.
Ooh, okay.
I would say that if you want to make an impact, then maybe that last circle ends up being on its own slide, or you can do some magic new thing where that the reality, and then you can say it's a pivot then. Don't say it's a pivot the first time. It's kind of like
Okay.
giving away you've given away this interesting moment. When the title comes on, I hear, oh, it's a pivot. I'm expecting a pivot.
Yeah, definitely. You could make the second circle like another page or something.
Yeah.
And
then
I
let's
think
just-
Emily did a good callback to the pivot in your spiel at the end, which is important.
That's right. And Will, you were talking about the pivot too,
Yeah.
so you had a pivot moment as well.
I don't know, pivot?
Pivot.
Everybody
She's trying to
knows
be
it.
French.
Then
No,
we had a
it's
pivot.
it's
on our
a
team.
Friends reference.
Oh, really?
Is it?
None of you know this?
Wait,
right?
which episode was that from?
When they're moving the couch and Ross is like, pivot. It's so
Oh my
annoying.
Oh, dear God.
Anyways, go on. I'm mad that nobody knows that.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I've seen like all of
Deeply
Friends.
sorry.
Yikes. Okay.
It's fine. Moving forward.
Oh, for this one, empowered. Is Grace empowered or is she an empowerer?
However,
Yeah.
Ooh.
Just
Oh, dang it.
yeah, she's an establishing power.
I'm just gonna fix that right now for you. I got you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, go to the other page about them.
Mm.
So I like this. I liked how you did the like this, but the ones that are like that one
Yeah.
looks just funny.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'll fix it.
It's just like awkward how long is there, like long
Yeah.
application processes. I don't know. I see what you're doing, but
Last minute details.
I don't know.
No, I agree with you.
cut
It's
off
like
text.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of information for us to parse, and we're making every time you bring it up, it's like we're forcing a comparison between the two. So there's we can sort of see like commonalities between build sustainable relationships and build international partnerships. Great, like those guys are aligned on those things. Long application process and planning for trips can be challenging. So planning for a trip is different than the long application process. Here's one thing: is you guys have a pretty lengthy application process when you show us the final presentation. I don't know if you characterize it that way or not too, but you might need to answer to that. Like to be able to get a better personalized experience, we needed a more lengthy application process. Or maybe it's better able to match with organizations means a more lengthy application onboarding process. So be careful about having conflicting information between these things. I'm acting in the stead of a critic who's going to be like, hey, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So have an answer for this.
At a high level, just because I think we're getting into that stuff, I think like, can you click actually forward?
Mm-hmm.
Keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going.
Attachment concepts.
Just keep clicking for a minute. Sorry, I know I'm being annoying,
See.
but I want to see. You kind of come back to personas ish at a point, right? Doesn't
My
like.
computer died.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Ah.
Sorry, can we get someone else's computer to be airplane?
Yeah. I mean, I can grab mine. It's over there charging.
That's an HDMI. No.
Anyway,
It does. Yes. But you would want.
Yeah, I was just
right
gonna
there.
say.
Yeah, but I don't want to open your notes too.
Oh, let me these guys.
You're right. Why is it doing this?
Just hit the green.
click the green button.
Just hit like.
Yeah.
I got it,
This
guys.
is fine.
Okay, cool.
Can I drive this for a second?
Yeah.
Oh, what am I doing?
There we go. Sections.
Yeah, so like kind of in this zone, you kind of circled back to the persona, and it felt like very far away from when you were talking about this persona. So I was gonna say, kind of like at a high level, you talked a lot and maybe too much about persona and concepts. And they felt like sprinkled across in a way that I was not, like, they didn't feel like concrete points, I guess is the best way I could say that. So I would say, as far as the persona goes, think about tying back your conversation to the persona, specifically Emily's section, going through the prototype, speaking back to it. This part in particular, I liked this, and I liked how you brought this back here, but I felt like this section right here, potential solutions, I mean, you talk about this, and then you talk about this, and then you kind of then you go to concepts, and then you kind of talk about it again in the prototype. So I think you need to figure out where that lives better. I like how I like how Will is bringing it back, but I felt a little lost in the process. Does that make sense? You're all like nodding, but not really.
Do you mean particularly in this section where we need to be referring back to the personas, or like talking about
I would just
how-
question if this, like, I would question if you need to so maybe you just need this slide. What about the spiritual users? I don't know if you need this and this and this.
You definitely don't need that.
Like, just bring me back to the pivot and tell me your way forward into the converge concept.
Can I ask a question on this slide?
Yeah.
too? Do you like the format of this? Because this is all one sentence. Or like, this is all the converged concept. It's just broken up like this.
What?
What to think about, do I like it? It's more the content of it in some ways.
Yeah, I feel like my issue is that you never said, and our converged concept is, and I thought that, like, Jessica, this is kind of goes back to, like, Jessica teed it up, going through the concept insights, and then Will took over and talked about personas, and then, like, I kind of lost it, and then did you present the converged? Is this your slide, Will?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
my
then,
last
like,
slide.
yeah. So then Will tease it up for Emily. So just like think about that story that you're trying to tell us. I think you're kind of on a roller coaster, if you will. Yeah.
Is it okay for us to just put the converged concept up there and for Will to read it as is? as what we came
Like
up with.
without the bullet points. Does
Because
that make
I
sense?
think Will did this in order because he felt that people might not understand it and he wanted to break it down for the audience.
Yeah, I didn't want to put just a whole like paragraph of a concept statement. I wanted to kind of like I'll be reading it like it was before, how it was like a paragraph, but this kind of breaks it down into what the specific parts of the concept, the converged concept, is about.
I don't really feel one way or the other about it because a concept statement is more like your guiding light. I don't necessarily like. I just wanted you to explicitly say, and our concept going forward was this. I think that if we were to go back, I was pretty lost in like way too much in Jessica's section about the concepts. Like, I like what you did. I liked this a lot, the initial concepts. I liked how you simplified them to easy apply. So like, I like these names, the unique or the simplified names. I mean, that's the concept, right? Like, that is the stripped back Ross version of the concept, and that makes sense to me, a nobody who has no idea what you've been doing for the last 5 weeks. So this slide, really effective. Then I feel like you kind of like ramble on about a bunch about how you're bringing it together. Oh wait, maybe I missed it because it's like a transition slide.
There's a transition slide where we got the social media thing in here.
Is it like,
It's where the text doubles up on top of sign up
Yeah.
and easy apply. That was a moment where it's like, anyway, you're gonna say
yeah, I was just gonna say like, I think you're definitely getting there based on the feedback that we gave you from the last presentation about like, you're getting out of the like contextual knowledge that you have, like you're getting there, but take it, you know, a whole step further to simplify this section to only give me the information that I absolutely need to know. And I think you're getting there, but I would question if some of these things, because you have this less is more of what's missing, and then you talk about rethinking the concepts, and you had a spiel here, and then you talk about these converged things. Is this the converged review and share and segment?
And then the iterated wireframes.
Okay, so these are the iterated concepts. And they're new concept statements or older concepts?
They're the new concept statements.
Okay. There's a lot of information in this section. I think we have to figure out. My concern, I think, and I think this is also speaking to Chelsea's point, is that there's so much information we tend to get a little bit lost. And it's
Yeah.
where that information is presented just a little more simply, whether it's like the 4 concepts across and then like getting rid of one and then figuring out how to combine 2 and then sort of saying like this is the most important thing. It's almost, it feels like it's sort of a basic equation. Like testing said, onboarding is really important and therefore we combined the 2 and we made it even more important. That's probably that's the depth of information you need to go to, as opposed, I think there's also when you look at the journey map slide, because I think that was probably the big offender for me. It's like when you show that much information, I was like, what? Like there's too much stuff there's too much information here
Oh yeah.
for us to make a decision as to which direction you guys are going in. What you really want to do is sort of say, out of journey map, like here's 3 key information points that inform why we converged on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can really extrapolate. Like, you have commonalities and common direction. Are those the same thing? Then you have opportunities. And then you have insights. Like, I would argue that those 4 things could be one slide that you talk about in, like, or 2 slides about, like, findings and outcomes, or findings and opportunities that we acted on for the prototype. I don't know how much of this is even worth showing. If there are like key findings that map back to your problem statement or map back to like where you're going, like you maybe show 1 or 2 of these slides and you highlight the area and say like this area tested well, so we took this and put it, like you could do something like that. But I feel like these slides feel to me like check boxes. I did these things. I really liked this slide, Will. I think this was strong. Like this feedback, very simplified. This is the type of stuff that we're looking for right here. Like this level of detail, not much. and you spoke to it, and that was great. And then, you know, opportunities, how we're going to take this going forward. I do like this slide. I think this could be styled maybe in like a different way that's kind of like, boom, back to the pivot or something, like a color or whatever, something in your
The
style.
only color in our deck.
Yeah, whatever. Like I think this is cute. You can do stuff like that. Like you could do a GIF on that pivot, like whatever. But you didn't hit this either. You didn't hit the mark. You kind of like, oh, and that's there. Like, so if you're gonna put a funny GIF in, it has to be like, boom. Why not both? And you have to just like really play it, and you can do that. That's fine. But I'm also saying maybe don't.
It's funny because like when I press play on the screen, it's just static, and then when I look up, it's actually moving.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh.
Well, I mean, make sure that remote is working, and practice.
Yeah, hopefully, I'll be looking at the screen when I press that click, so then.
Yeah. Or just maybe get rid of this because we might not want you to talk about all this detail for the person for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, converge concept.
I just didn't know. You sounded like you had something to say. I think we already talked about
I was
this.
making weird noises. I think I did want to say something about the converge concept. Is that I think that you started off with sort of like our findings, and that was great. Like at one point, I was ready to be like, oh, tell me more about that. Like, give me annotations off of wireframes. I'm like, no, not here. This is maybe another way to. This is an opportunity for you to be able to. You're making a case for your converge prototype in this thing. So what you're going to do is give me more specifics about what you're going to do. So when you say transparency of information, what's the feature that you're going to use? Like what's going to give you that transparency of information? Because like we are in the double diamond sort of thing. We have gone broad, we've tested, we've gone through 2 rounds of concept testing, and now we're defining. So define it for me. Like this is the moment when you as a team can define what this thing is, and like when you're making it. So tell us about how transparency of information is going to be elevated. Talk about how you're going to, you talk about to build trust and establish a personal connection with users. Tell us the mechanisms by which you're going to build trust. Like how are you going to show trust? And that sets up Emily for the walkthrough. Because then she can talk about how that's going to work when they do the walkthrough of the prototype. So you're kind of like you're the, I forget what the stage thing is, but like you're the setup guy, and then Emily delivers on the goods.
I was gonna say, you two work together to figure out how much information you're gonna give, to kind of Doug's point. But I think that a lot of what Doug is saying is also stuff that would be a candidate for Emily to take over and talk to in the prototype run through. So there's like some high level things that you can kind of bullet out, or not actually bullet out, but like say out or call out in the, in talking, either teeing up to the converge concept, like, because I imagine you're going to go from opportunities to the concept. I guess you'll maybe talk about, you're going to talk about opportunities, and then you're going to probably talk about the pivot, and then you're going to talk about the converged concept. And so I think in there you have like some space to talk about the opportunities and how that led into the converged concept, how you're keeping in mind your personas and your pivot, and then hand it over to Emily to be hitting on some of these bullet points, like, based on our converged concept, we wanted clear transparency of information, so we have done XYZ. Like, call out some of these things as it's running through. You looking at the screen is fine, like pointing at stuff.
Do you want me to do that from a first person point of view, kind of like I did, like acting like Grace, or should I do that as more of like a
I would
I'm
act
stepping
like
back and explaining to
I think
what the
Grace is
transparency is here and like what?
you could do a bit of both. You can. I think walking through a prototype as your persona is a good way to approach it. I think it's also okay to like step out of that, and you can kind of say, as designers, like, we made this decision for Grace for blah blah blah. I don't know.
I got a question just really quick. Is the problem statement written with Daniel in mind? Is there any bit of Daniel in this?
I think we looked at it.
Because I read the first thing, like even the way that you sort of described it, it sounded like it was defining grace, but there was something about organizations in there, so it felt like there might be something. What I'm saying is that if you ever want to bring Daniel back in as a secondary persona, like get an insert point for him. Like if you need to talk about a feature within the prototype that might be relevant to Daniel, like that justifies him being in this presentation deck.
Yeah.
If we can't find anything in here that we ever developed before, you might want to kill him. I mean,
You could kill him.
I think he's cool, actually. I think, like he.
So long as
I
it
mean,
is
technically
brown.
there is stuff that is applicable to him in all of this. And like through the journey maps, we found similarities, but there was overlap with Grace's. So primarily we were solving for.
You might want to sort of state this before you reveal the problem statement. You want to say from this, from these two personas, for the majority of it, we're talking about Grace, but there are intersects with some of those needs as well.
Should I set that up too from the beginning, where I'll say that, like, since Grace is our primary persona,
Yes.
moving forward, keeping her in mind at the forefront, but we're also taking some of Daniel's considerations in mind.
Right. And then that gives Emily an opportunity to talk about potentially something in the prototype.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you have an opportunity to point out a few things as Daniel too. I'm gonna keep going.
Oh, go back to that. Hold on a second.
This one?
Yeah. That line. Hold on a second. Go back one. Solid loaded concept. What is a solid load? It sounds like a candy bar I want to eat. But what is a solid load? Just a concept.
Yeah.
You can
Okay.
say solid concept is good. I'm not too sure
Yeah.
what a loaded concept is. Really.
It's a very long
How we
concept.
brought our concept to life. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
Yeah, I mean, I kind of hope that you don't really need to talk about the converged prototype. I think, like, give that to Will. You focus on this other stuff. You didn't tell me where Entrust came from. I think you were kind of like rushed.
So where it came from was actually this slide right here. So like the spectrum of trust, transparency, and personal connection are the two things like two separate people would need to build a sense of trust, which is why we named it Entrust.
Oh, okay. Maybe I just didn't hear that. I mean, could this be one page where, why do I keep doing that? 2 boxes, arrow, sense of trust, another arrow, 2, just like this, and
Yeah.
trust.
Probably.
I think about that. Okay, so just some feedback on your prototype in general, and I don't know if you'll be able to fix this time-wise, but you use the name Grace in your, can I play this? How do I play this?
Right.
Yeah. This clicker.
Using Grace.
Are you talking about the name Grace in the review section?
Yeah, you like read Grace's review. That's confusing because technically you're Grace, right?
Yeah.
And then your 2 LinkedIn recommendations were both named Larry. So like, it's those things though that can like really trip somebody up.
Okay.
I'm not necessarily saying you need to make those changes for tomorrow, but think
Yeah.
about that as you go forward. Like, come up with unique names. Don't duplicate content. It's just it confuses things. It just sucks.
I can change that tonight, Emily.
Yeah, we probably could.
It is super not important in the grand scheme of things.
Right. Don't spend
Deprioritize that. You've got a lot of work to do on the presentation for tomorrow. So, and it's already like the end of the day. So keep that in mind. I'm not gonna like criticize that if you think it's a small thing. The Grace one might confuse people, but
It's a nice looking prototype though.
I
Yeah,
can change Larry
that's my
in
only
2
thing.
It's your onboarding flow is the concept, and I think you did a pretty good job walking through it. It was a little long,
Mhm.
but yeah, see if you can time yourself out on that prototype, and try to make it tight, and definitely use. Much as Will's going to set you up with, what the features are, and then you're going to talk about the features, and then you can bring in design principles, and you can bring in the user. So
Okay.
talk about how it's solving for Grace.
My only concern with that is like it's really hard to make the video short and fit all of that in. But
Feel free to have somebody off screen, like I think, have have somebody controlling the video for you if you need to stop and talk or make a point about something. Like work through the video so that you can pause it if you need to. I know it's a little bit harder, but if we can wheel this off screen a little bit so that you have somebody that can pause it, and you can make a point, and then move on to something next. That's probably better.
It might be easier if I'm the one doing that, just so, because I'll be like the one speaking. Is that like weird if I'm up there pausing?
I would try to not do that. I would try to make it work with your video.
Okay.
That's the best advice I can give you. I would probably be in the camp of like, you get 1 more minute than the rest of them to talk about this stuff, as this is the meat of this your final project right here.
Yes.
So I wouldn't worry so much about cutting the time, but I would say improving the quality and the message back to the things that your teammates have said. It's also great to be like, as Will said, as Jessica said.
Yeah, I really like the fact that we are trying to reinforce the fact that your teammates are making points that set you up for success down the road. Like, that's really how this is supposed to work. Because your journey is kind of like, you're evaluating certain things and you get to take the ball and run with it. So it's like a relay race.
For the walkthrough, I don't think it's that important to like talk through every form field that you're filling out.
Okay.
And also, or even hearing like Grace wants to do this, or I want to do this, or I don't want to do this. I want to hear how she's feeling and how she's being impacted by your solution as a whole. And those are all points that you can even take from Will's Converge prototype slide. Like feeling excited to start a new opportunity or whatever was on it.
Yeah, like you have the points in your journey map.
Yeah, or I was thinking
At this
about
point,
Jessica's scenario, like
Yeah.
the really happy scenario where everything worked out great. Like, that's her story. Yeah. It's not exactly that, but I'm saying it's like, it's as if you were to write a new scenario. This is like past tense, post product when you're using it, and you can walk them through the use of it and how it solves problems.
Also, this is really tiny, but I think it would make it look better. Maybe I should say it later. I'll show you guys later on your actual prototype. But there's like right on the statement of intent screen, you're using a text field, which is like a one-liner thing. But if you just switch like one option to say text area, then things will line up better. And
Okay.
yeah. But you don't need to re-record your video for it. It's just like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to re-record it to get the Grace and the Larry.
You don't have to do that though.
Yeah.
You're not like, seriously prioritize getting this presentation like cleaned up, simplified, work together as a team, practice. You guys need a lot of practice on this. And then if you have time, go back and do those things. I'm trying to help you prioritize because that just changing things in your prototype tonight just does not feel like it's a rabbit hole that you'll go down and you'll spend, even if it's an hour of your time, you're not going to get sleep, you're not going to be rested for the presentation.
I know I'll be able to go in and fix those really fast.
All right.
So it would take.
okay, time box. Yeah. Give yourself
Yeah,
like
it
15
won't take me
minutes.
long.
All right.
All right.